Hey friends, I'm the storyteller. Before you get too comfortable, do me a small favor, hit like and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy this kind of storytelling. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Ashley Hall was just 17 years old, the oldest of four sisters living in Darlington with her mom and siblings. Because she was the oldest, and from what I understand, her mom Andrea was raising them on her own, Ashley naturally took on a lot of responsibility. She wasn't just a big sister. She was kind of like a second mom too, helping around the house, taking care of her little sisters, keeping things together when life got hectic. Her mom described her as her rock. And I believe that, not just because she was helpful, but because she was always there, emotionally, always steady. More than a daughter, Andrea said, Ashley was like her best friend. At the time, Ashley was taking a childcare course at Darlington College. She wanted to become a nursery nurse someday, or maybe work in a daycare or with a playgroup, something that involved looking after little kids. It made sense she was already doing that at home, and she genuinely loved it. She also had a big soft spot for animals. All through her life, she'd had pets, mostly goldfish and hamsters, but her love for animals was obvious to everyone around her. She was gentle, kind-hearted, the kind of person who cared deeply even about the smallest things. Growing up, she was part of the Brownies, and later, the girl Gadeshi had this spirit of kindness and community. But by 2009, like most teens at that time, life had shifted online. Social media was everything: MySpace, Facebook. It was the beginning of that digital age where texting and online chatting slowly took over. Ashley fit right into that world. She had a big circle of friends. She was friendly, bubbly, always talking about boys, sharing photos, writing statuses, liking posts, just your typical teenage girl. She loved her phone, like I really loved it. She'd stay up late texting friends, glued to her screen like most teenagers back then. Any bit of pocket money she had, straight to mobile credit so she could keep the conversation going. And then one day in October 2009, Ashley was just doing what she usually did, scrolling through Facebook, chatting, just being online when a friend request popped up. It was from a guy named Peter Cartwright. He looked young, attractive, around her age. In his profile picture, he wasn't even wearing a shirt, something that probably made quite an impression on a 17-year-old girl back in 2009. Ashley looked through his profile. He was listed as 17, just like her. He had tons of photos, lots of wall posts, and surprisingly, a friend count that was over 3,000. From the outside, nothing looked suspicious. It just seemed like Peter was one of those popular, outgoing types online. They didn't have any mutual friends though. It's not clear whether Ashley noticed that, but either way, she accepted the request. Not long after that, a message landed in her inbox. It was from Peter, just a simple "Hi," Ashley replied. And just like that, a conversation started, and it kept going. They were texting more and more. And soon, those messages started ending with little X's. Those digital kisses that, in the UK especially, meant a lot back then. One X was friendly, a few meant flirty. And between two teenagers, it quickly became part of the excitement, part of the anticipation. The more they chatted, the more it felt like something special was building. Ashley was buzzing with excitement. She even told her friends at college about Peter, showed them his photos. They were excited for her too. Because honestly, boys never really gave Ashley much attention before. She hadn't had a boyfriend, she struggled with self-esteem, especially when it came to relationships. So, when this confident, good-looking guy started paying attention to her, it meant the world. After a few days, they switched from Facebook to MSN Messenger, which was the thing back then, and Ashley changed her screen name to Playgirl. They messaged constantly, every single night, sharing details about their hobbies, their favorite things, their dislikes, just getting to know each other like any two teens would. Peter told her he was a DJ. He said he went by the name DJ Pete. Peter was full of compliments. He kept telling Ashley how beautiful she was, how attractive, how special, and for Ashley, this kind of attention was something new. She'd never really had a boy speak to her like that before. It felt nice. It felt exciting. Just a few days into their chats, Peter asked her if she wanted to meet up in person, and Ashley said yes. They made a plan, set a date, but at the last minute, Peter bailed. There's no clear reason why. Maybe he gave her an excuse. Maybe he just didn't show. But whatever it was, he apologized afterward, said he was sorry, asked for another chance. And Ashley, still swept up in this whirlwind of first-time attention and affection, she said yes again. They made a new plan. The date was set for the 25th of October, 2009. This time, Peter asked Ashley if she wanted to spend the night at his house, promising that his dad would drive her home the next morning. Everything seemed to be sorted, and Ashley agreed. In the week leading up to that day, Ashley was buzzing with excitement. At college, it was all she and her friends could talk about. She was going to spend the night at a boy's house, something she'd never done before. It felt like such a big moment. Then came the day Sunday, the 25th of October. That morning, Peter messaged her again. He asked if it would be okay for his dad to come pick her up from her house since he didn't drive. Ashley said, yeah, of course, that was fine. She spent the whole day getting ready, packing her overnight bag, messaging her friends on MSN, chatting with Peter. Her family remembered that she had been in an incredibly good mood that day, excited, glowing, just really happy. Around 7:30 p.m., Ashley came running downstairs to ask her mom, Andrea, if she could sleep over at a friend's house. Even though it was a Sunday night, it was the October half-term break, so no school the next day. Andrea said, sure, as long as she was home by lunchtime. Ashley agreed, smiled, and ran back upstairs to finish packing. It was around this time that Ashley received a text. It was from Peter's dad. Hi, An. It's Pete's dad. Are you sure you don't mind me picking you up? Pete's really looking forward to seeing you. And yes, it's okay for you to stay. Ashley replied, no, it's fine. I don't mind. I trust him, so I trust you. Thank you. Shortly after that, another text came in, this time from Peter himself. My dad's on his way, babe. Excuse the state of him, LOL. He doesn't have to come in and meet your mom, does he? Lol, he'll be a mess probably. Oh, Han, are you wearing some sexy underwear for me? Hee hee, Ashley replied playfully. Okay, babe. No, he doesn't, lol. And it's okay, haha. What pair has he got? You'll have to wait and see, won't you? That night, Ashley Hall sat by her bedroom window, heart racing with excitement. She was waiting for Peter's father to pull up outside the house. And when she finally saw a car arrive, a dark blue Ford Mondeo, sent Peter a quick text. He's here, babe. She grabbed her overnight bag, rushed downstairs, and as she was heading out the door, she called back upstairs to her mom, who was busy putting Ashley's younger sisters to bed. All she said was, bye, and her mom called back, bye, love. That was it. That was the last time Andrea Hall ever saw her daughter. Ashley stepped outside and climbed into the waiting car. From there, she was supposed to be heading to Peter's house for the night, but she never made it back home. The next day, around lunchtime, Andrea was expecting Ashley to walk through the door just like she'd promised. Ashley wasn't the type to break the rules. She was responsible. She always respected her curfews. So when the clock hit midday and there was no sign of her, Andrea figured maybe she was just running a little late. Maybe she lost track of time. Maybe she was still at her friend's house, having a good time. Andrea didn't want to be that kind of mom, the one who nags or hovers too much. Ashley was 17 now. Maybe she just needed a little space. But as the afternoon wore on, that calm turned into worry. Ashley still hadn't come home. She hadn't sent a single text, not even a quick, I'll be home soon. Andrea started to panic. She tried calling Ashley's phone, texted her, called again, no answer. That's when she reached out to Ashley's friends, hoping maybe one of them had heard from her, or maybe she'd gone to someone else's house. But every one of them said the same thing. No, we haven't heard from her. But we do know she was supposed to meet a boy last night. Of course, by now Andrea was panicking. Who was this boy? Ashley had never mentioned a boy before, not even once. Desperate for answers, Andrea went onto Ashley's Facebook account. Maybe she could find a name, a clue, anything. And that's when she came across a profile Peter Cartwright. She clicked on it and scrolled through his page, looking for any sign of a connection. But there was nothing public between them. No posts on each other's walls, no tags, no comments. It was like they barely knew each other. But Andrea knew better. Just because there was nothing visible didn't mean they hadn't been talking privately. Still, she had nothing concrete. No idea who this Peter really was. No phone number, no address. All she could do was keep calling Ashley's phone, over and over, just hoping, somehow, her daughter would pick up. Maybe she lost track of time. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she was already on her way home. Andrea kept telling herself those things, because what else could a mother do? Ashley was 17, almost an adult, just a year away from turning 18. And Andrea had always tried to give her a bit of space. She trusted her. She had no reason not to. Ashley was a good kid, responsible, honest. She always kept her mom updated if she was going to be late, so Andrea kept calling and calling. Finally, after 30 calls, someone picked up the phone, but it wasn't Ashley. It was a police officer. Andrea identified herself right away. "I'm Ashley's mom," she said. And the officer paused before replying, "I'm really sorry to inform you. We've just found your daughter's body. She's been murdered." Ashley Hall had been murdered within just an hour of being picked up from her home that night. Her body was discovered fully clothed, lying in a farmer's field hidden behind a hedge. The location was just off a lay-by, near the edge of a muddy road not far from the Edgefield Services area. The details were horrific. Ashley had been sexually assaulted in more than one way, and the cause of death was ruled as suffocation. Her body wasn't found until almost 2 full days after she had left home with who she believed was Peter's father. But as you've probably figured out by now, not everything about that meeting was what it seemed. In fact, the police didn't even discover Ashley's murder through a missing persons report. They didn't stumble upon her body first and work backwards from there. They found out about it because the killer walked into a police station and confessed. At that point, no one, even Andrea, had reported Ashley missing yet. No alarms had been raised. And then, out of nowhere, someone walked into the station and said, "I've killed someone." It happened on the morning of Tuesday, the 27th of October. Police had arrested a man on some relatively minor traffic offenses. He'd been wanted for a while nothing serious, just outstanding charges that had finally caught up to him. His car's registration had been flagged. Officers went to his location, and he was brought in for processing. Nothing about that arrest seemed out of the ordinary. He was placed in a holding cell while they figured things out. But then, while sitting in that cell, this man calmly asked an officer to come over. And when they did, he said, "I've killed somebody last night. I need to speak to someone from SID, the Criminal Investigation Department." The officer who heard that confession was stunned, completely thrown off. He thought this man was just in for a couple of traffic offenses, something minor, nothing like this. But the man had just said he'd killed someone. The officer quickly stopped him from saying anything further. He told him, "Okay, don't say any more. We're going to the front desk. There are cameras, there's audio recording. If you're going to confess to something like this, it needs to be official. It needs to be recorded." And so they took him out of the cell and walked him up to the front desk. The moment was captured on video. And that man, the one calmly admitting to the murder of Ashley Hall, was 32-year-old Peter Chapman. Not some lost teenage boy, not the charming DJ Ashley had been chatting with, but a grown man. A drifter from the north of England. That first confession at the desk was just the beginning. Afterward, Chapman was moved into a formal interview room. Everything was done properly, officially. And in that room, he gave a full, detailed confession. He admitted that he had been grooming Ashley online for about a week, using a fake Facebook profile under the name Peter Cartwright. The teenage boy, Ashley, had believed she was talking to the one who was supposedly 17, The one with the shirtless photos, the DJ named Pete, was all a lie. It was Chapman all along. And Ashley wasn't the first girl he had targeted. In fact, a couple of weeks before Ashley, Chapman had been grooming another girl, this time a 15-year-old. Again, he used the same fake name, Peter Cartwright. Same photos, same approach. They agreed to meet in a B&Q car park. But when the 15-year-old girl got there, she saw the car Chapman had told her to look out for. And inside wasn't a teenage boy. It was a bald, 32-year-old man with glasses. She ran. Thank God, she ran. That failed attempt shook Chapman. He realized that meeting girls in person wasn't going to be easy because as soon as they saw the real him, they'd flee. He needed a better plan. A smarter way to trick someone into getting into his car before they realized the truth. And that next target turned out to be Ashley. This time, he came up with something more elaborate. He would still pretend to be Peter Cartwright online, but when it came time to meet, he would pose as Peter's father. He put real effort into it. Bought a second phone separate from the one he used as Peter, just so he could text Ashley as the dad, which was a big deal considering his circumstances. Chapman was homeless, he was unemployed. Buying a second phone wasn't easy, but he made it happen just to carry out this plan. And it worked. Ashley had no idea. She got into that car willingly trusting that she was being picked up by Peter's dad, someone who was just doing his son a favor. No one really knows what happened during that drive. No one knows what was said, how long they talked, whether Ashley was nervous, whether she had second thoughts. But we do know how that journey ended. Chapman drove them off the lay-by, down into a quiet, empty field. And there he assaulted, raped, and murdered Ashley Hall. Once they arrived at that quiet lay-by, far from view, Peter Chapman forced Ashley out of the car. Out there, in the stillness of that field, things escalated quickly and horrifically. He restrained her, tied up her hands and her feet using tape he had brought with him. Then, he forced her to perform oral sex. Afterwards, he gagged her, covering her mouth with tape then, removed her lower clothing, and raped her. When he was finished, he cut the tape from her wrists, letting her hands loose. He told her to pull her clothes back up herself. Once she did, he tied her wrists again. Then, finally, he took what was left of the tape from the roll and began wrapping it around her head tight, around her mouth, around her nose, over and over again, until she couldn't breathe. Ashley suffocated to death. After Ashley was dead, Chapman began trying to cover his tracks. He removed all the tape from her body at least. That's what investigators believe. Her body wasn't found with any tape still on it. Chapman took all of it with him, likely tossing it somewhere along the way. Then, he moved Ashley's body further into the hedge, pushing her deeper into the brush, trying to hide her from view, tucking her out of sight as if that could erase what he had done. When he was done, he got back into his car and drove away. He kept driving through the night, but by morning, his time was up. His car registration had been flagged, and that's how police found him. He was pulled over, arrested for his outstanding traffic offenses, and brought into the station. And it was there sitting in that holding cell that Peter Chapman decided to confess. It's chilling to think about what might have happened if police hadn't caught him when they did. Because Chapman wasn't planning on stopping. In fact, he was already on his way to Middlesbrough that very same day to meet another teenage girl. Who knows how that meeting would have ended? When police searched Peter Chapman's car, it became immediately clear he hadn't even tried to get rid of the evidence. Inside the vehicle, they found Ashley's mobile phone, still there. Her overnight bag was also untouched, filled with the clothes she had carefully packed, expecting a fun night at a boy's house. Everything was still in place. The car itself was a mess rubbish, everywhere. Fast food wrappers scattered all over the seats and floor. Amidst all of that chaos, they found something far more disturbing. There were bundles of tape with Ashley's hair still stuck in it. The cardboard core of a tape roll was there too, showing he'd used an entire roll that night. And then, there was a used condom reportedly found in the compartment of a CD player. That part of the report raised questions. It's unclear whether he was trying to hide it or if it was just left there. But compared to everything else in the car, it was strange because nothing else had been hidden. At this point, Ashley's body still hadn't been recovered. So police made the decision to take Chapman out of custody and bring him with them. He was the only one who knew where to go. He directed them to that field, and within 48 hours of the murder, Ashley Hall's body was found. While the investigation was underway at the crime scene, Peter Chapman was taken back to the police station. There, he went through a series of formal interviews, answering questions, giving statements, and expanding on his confession. At one point during his interview, Chapman reportedly said, "I had to tell you today, I couldn't just leave her there like that. Has anyone been in touch with her family?" Some sources later claimed that during his confession, Chapman tried to explain why he killed Ashley. He allegedly told police that during the time they were together, they got into an argument. And during that argument, Ashley said things that reminded him of his ex-girlfriend. Words, phrases, maybe even her tone it all triggered something in him. He said it took him back to the anger he'd felt in that past relationship. And in that moment, that anger spiraled into violence, into something he claimed he couldn't control. And that's when he murdered Ashley. It's worth noting that not every source mentions this theory. Some only briefly refer to it, and details about the supposed argument remain unclear. There's no confirmed information on what exactly was said or if this version of events was even entirely true. But what we do know is that it ended with Ashley's life being taken. As police dug deeper into Peter Chapman's background, they learned that he was homeless, though not in the sense of sleeping rough on the streets every night. Most nights, Chapman slept in his car. And occasionally, when he could afford it, he would treat himself to a night at the Metro Inn Hotel, tucked away on an industrial estate in Stockton. That was his version of comfort. He was always on the move. He liked driving long distances, drifting from place to place, Liverpool, Merseyside, Durham, and Darlington in particular. Darlington meant something to him. That was where he was born. But Chapman wasn't raised there. After his birth, he was brought up in Stockton-on-Tees, living with his grandparents. There's little known about his parents, where they were, whether they were involved in his life, or what circumstances led to him being raised by others. At school, classmates remembered him as a loner. He was different. People described him as socially awkward, often doing or saying things that felt uncomfortable or out of place. The kind of person who would insert himself into conversations and say something completely off topic or just plain strange. His interactions with police started early. The first time Chapman came to their attention, he was 15 years old. That was when he was accused of sexual assault, but the case was eventually dropped. Then, 4 years later, when he was 19, another girl came forward. She told police that Chapman had raped her. This girl had known him for a while. They were friends. She said he had gained her trust over time, and then one day he snapped. Everything changed. But once again, the case was dropped. And it's important to say, we don't know the details behind those drop cases. We don't know whether it was due to lack of evidence or if the victims withdrew their statements. That information was never made public. But what is clear is that the warning signs were there. That same year, when Peter Chapman was 19 years old, he was sentenced to prison for the first time. He had raped 2 sex workers. Both attacks happened just days apart, but involved 2 completely different women. In each case, Chapman kidnapped the woman, tied her up, and held a knife to her throat. He raped them while threatening to kill them if they resisted or tried to escape, and when he was done, he robbed them. The second of the 2 attacks involved a 24-year-old woman. He kidnapped her and forced her into a car, then drove her around for 20 miles while she sat there terrified, convinced she was going to die. During that drive, Chapman didn't just threaten her, he tormented her. He told her in detail about what he had done to the first woman 2 days earlier. He told her he was going to do all of the same things to her, get the knife out, rape her, rob her. Both of these attacks were carried out in a stolen car, which only added to his list of charges. Despite the brutality of the crimes, Chapman was only sentenced to 7 years in prison. And unbelievably, he only served half of that sentence. Just 3.5 to 4 years behind bars, and then he was out. Chapman was released in 2001. He was placed on the sex offenders register, which should have meant strict monitoring, but that's not what happened. In fact, the monitoring was so ineffective, it was almost as if he hadn't been on the register at all. Over the next 8 years, leading up to Ashley Hall's murder, Chapman stayed completely under the radar. He wasn't being checked on, he wasn't being tracked, and no one really knew where he was. In 2002, when Peter Chapman was 27 years old, he moved to Liverpool to live with a new girlfriend and her young son, but the relationship didn't last long. Once the woman found out that Chapman was on the sex offenders register, she panicked. She ended the relationship immediately, kicked him out of the house, and told him never to come back. That was the beginning of his downward spiral. With nowhere to go and no steady income, Chapman started living in his car. He had no stable home, no job, and no support. He resorted to theft and robbery just to survive, stealing for money, food, petrol, anything to keep going. That same year, Chapman was arrested again, this time on suspicion of knife point, rape, and robbery of a sex worker in Cheshire. And just a year later, in 2003, he was arrested again for the exact same crime. But this time, it involved a teenage sex worker. Both of these cases were eventually dropped. It's unclear why. The details weren't made public. We don't know whether the victims withdrew or whether the police felt there wasn't enough evidence to move forward. But whatever the reason, Peter Chapman walked free again. And despite being on the sex offenders register, Chapman continued to fall through the cracks. There was no active monitoring, no follow-up, no one checked in on where he was or what he was doing. And it raises the question how many of these crimes could have been prevented if someone had just been keeping a closer eye on him. In 2004, Peter Chapman was sent to prison again, but not for rape, not for robbery, not for the attacks he committed. He served a year and a half in prison for not complying with the rules of the sex offenders register. That was it. Instead of facing serious consequences for the violent crimes he had already committed, the system handed him a prison sentence for breaking the rules, not for the acts themselves. As part of the sex offenders register requirements, Chapman was supposed to notify police every time he changed addresses. Every time he moved, even if it was just from one area to another, he had to check in. But because Chapman was homeless and constantly moving around, he wasn't keeping police informed. He was slipping through the cracks. And the punishment for that failure? Just 18 months? During this time, when he was supposed to be monitored, Chapman somehow managed to enroll in a computer course that was held inside a school. A convicted sex offender was able to sign up and attend a course held in the same building as children, and no one seemed to notice. Around the same time, he found a new girlfriend. For a while, they even moved into a new house together. But like everything else in Chapman's life, it didn't last long. One day, after getting into a heated argument with a neighbor, that neighbor's house mysteriously caught fire. It seemed suspicious, too coincidental. Chapman was never officially charged with arson in connection to that incident, but after the fire, he became wanted by police and he went on the run. In early 2009, the same year Ashley Hall was murdered, Peter Chapman was involved in a hit and run, and just like so many times before, as soon as it happened, he ran. He fled hundreds of miles away, vanishing off the grid. Police had no idea where to find him, because once again he was homeless. No permanent address, no trail to follow. He moved from place to place, slipping through every gap in the system. Looking at Chapman's history, it becomes painfully clear he carried a deep-rooted hatred toward women. He believed he could use them, manipulate them, punish them. He wanted what he wanted, and he didn't believe anyone could stop him. On the fake Facebook profile he had created under the name Peter Cartwright, had collected over 3,000 friends. And every single one of those friends was female. Most were teenagers. Ages ranged from about 13 to 17, with only a few in their early 20s. And chillingly, more than 100 of those girls were added on the exact same day that Chapman first messaged Ashley Hall. Chapman didn't just stop at Facebook. He had fake profiles on several different social media sites, including MSN, Messenger, something called Tank.com, and other platforms that were popular at the time. On almost every site, He used the same alias, DJ Pete. When police searched Chapman's laptop, which, like many of his belongings, had been stolen, they found a deeply disturbing pattern. There were hundreds of indecent images, photos of women and girls, many of them underage. He had obtained most of these images by gaining the trust of young girls online, just like he did with Ashley. He would flirt, act interested, be kind, gentle, pretend to be someone they could trust. And many of these girls believed him. They believed they were talking to a 17-year-old DJ. They thought their photos were safe, but they weren't. Police also uncovered dozens of conversations with other young girls, mostly based in the northeast of England, areas like Durham and Middlesbrough. Chapman had been planning to meet them. He had dates in mind, conversations about meeting up. Some of them were set to happen just days after Ashley's murder. And as mentioned earlier, just weeks before, there had already been that other near miss. The 15-year-old girl who agreed to meet Peter Cartwright at a B&Q car park and then ran when she saw the truth. Thank God she ran. There was also another teenage girl in Middlesbrough that Chapman had tried to meet this one just before the other 15-year-old. But for some reason, that meeting never went ahead either. Looking back, it's devastating to think about what happened to Ashley Hall. It should have never happened. And when you consider the timeline, the number of girls he was actively targeting in the days before and after her murder, it's terrifying to imagine what could have happened if just one thing had gone differently. If he hadn't confessed, if those other girls hadn't made an excuse or run away, Peter Chapman was already dangerous. And he was on his way to becoming something far worse. He could have become a serial killer. Ashley's funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Her friends, her teachers, her classmates. It was clear Ashley had touched so many lives in just 17 short years. She was kind, she was warm, she was full of potential, and all of that was stolen from her. Meanwhile, Peter Chapman, in the months following his arrest, appeared in court multiple times, and each time he pleaded not guilty. Despite his confession, despite everything he had admitted, he was still telling the court that he wasn't guilty. It didn't make sense. But that changed on the 8th of March 2010, almost 6 months after Ashley's murder. That day, in court, Peter Chapman stood up and finally pled guilty to the rape, murder, and kidnapping of Ashley Hall. Peter Chapman was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 35 years to be served before he could even be considered for release. During sentencing, the judge described Chapman's actions as an evil scheme, one that had been carefully planned with considerable detail, all designed to trap his victim. The judge went further, calling Chapman a very grave danger, especially to young women. Chapman is currently serving his sentence in a high-security Category A prison in County Durham, the very same area where he committed Ashley's murder. But even in prison, Chapman has shown no real remorse. He's written letters to an old friend, complaining about life behind bars. In those letters, he talked about how boring prison is. He whined that there are no PlayStations and that he only gets a few channels on the television. He said he's tired of everything that's on. But perhaps the most disturbing part of those letters is what he confessed. Chapman claimed that he killed Ashley because she reminded him of an ex-girlfriend. He didn't say which one, but he wrote that he despised her, that he held deep resentment toward her. And when he met Ashley, her personality, her words, they were too similar to his ex's. He said that everything Ashley said in that car infuriated him. He said that he put tape over her mouth just to shut her up and that he didn't mean to kill her. He wrote that he didn't intend for it to end that way, and now there's nothing he can do to change it. In those same prison letters, Peter Chapman also wrote that he wished he'd joined the army when he left school. He believed that maybe if he had done that, he would either be living a completely different life, or he would be dead. He went on to say that people like him, those who had committed horrible crimes, should be sent to Afghanistan to defuse bombs. He believed that would be a fitting punishment, either to be put to good use or be killed by the bombs themselves. And when Andrea Hall, Ashley's mother, heard about that, she said she'd be perfectly happy for him to do it. She said that for what he did to her daughter, he should have been hanged. After Ashley's murder, police forces involved in the case admitted that they had fallen short in more than one area. They admitted that they could have done more to protect her and to protect every other girl that Chapman ever contacted, that they had the opportunity to intervene but didn't. They blamed it on a lack of resources, not enough officers, not enough funding. And according to one source, though this hasn't been widely confirmed, the police constable in charge of monitoring Chapman hadn't even received proper training in how to supervise sex offenders. He was tasked with overseeing a known predator, despite not having the qualifications or tools to do it effectively. In the aftermath, even Facebook released a public statement. They said they were deeply saddened by what had happened. They published a set of safety guidelines urging users, especially those under 18, never to meet strangers from the internet in real life. Back in Darlington, at Ashley's college, her friends and teachers wanted to make sure her story meant something. They created a list called Ashley's Rules. It was a simple but powerful guide for staying safe online. It was handed out to every child in Darlington that year. Rules like, always meet strangers in groups in public, well-lit places. Never share personal information online with someone you don't truly know. Ashley's mother, Andrea, also attempted to sue several police departments, including those in Merseyside and Durham, failing to monitor Peter Chapman properly. She said that losing her daughter in such a preventable, violent way had shattered her mental health, that the pain of knowing it could have been avoided only made the loss harder, but her lawsuit was denied. Authorities said that because Andrea wasn't present when Ashley died and wasn't there in the immediate aftermath, they weren't required to pay any compensation. But just because Andrea didn't see her daughter's final moments, just because she didn't stand in that field where her daughter was left, doesn't mean she hasn't carried every detail in her heart every single day since. Because she did lose her, and she's still living with that pain.